It's like you're Jason Voorhees, except the good guy? Happy Halloween! I'm Roger the Retro Gaming Puppet, and this is Obscure Old Games. Now, you would think that with Joe having just covered Friday the 13th on the NES as part of this year's same name, different game Halloween special, that it would be the perfect time to cover Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti for the Famicom. But we already did that 5 years ago, so instead let's take a look at our favorite installment in the classic Splatterhouse trilogy. It's Splatterhouse 2 on the Sega Genesis. Splatterhouse, if you're unaware, is a game series from Namco with 5 installments, the latest being a mostly maligned PS3 and Xbox 360 game released in 2010. The first game was released in the arcade before being ported to TurboGrafx 16, and NEC put some major muscle behind advertising it here in the US. I guess the combination of it being an exclusive port and being way more violent than what Nintendo would have allowed on the NES at the time made it a prime candidate to move systems. Unfortunately, the game didn't do so well, mostly owing to the console's lousy install base here in North America, so parts 2 and 3 were made directly for the Genesis. They got released worldwide, but you get the sense that these games were really made with a Western audience in mind. Besides the numerous references to Western horror films, the Genesis had a considerably larger install base in PAL territories in the US than the TurboGrafx. But the PC Engine, that is the Japanese TurboGrafx, had a way larger install base in its native Japan, so if Namco was pointing these at the Japanese audience, it wouldn't have made sense to do it on Sega's hardware. Now this may have some of you asking about Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti, and well, I don't really have an answer for that, except that perhaps Tengen, who was releasing Namco's NES games in the US at the time, were worried about getting sued or causing a controversy. At any rate, the end of Splatterhouse sees our hero Rick, the Jason Voorhees cosplayer, escape the titular home without his lady love and burning the house to the ground in the process. Part 2 begins with the Terror Mask, which gives Rick his power, visiting him in his nightmares to implore him to return, and together they can save Jennifer, despite her death in Part 1. You know, and this is where some folks would say that this game is both a sequel and a remake, like Evil Dead 2, but yeah, anybody who would say such a thing clearly wasn't paying much attention to the story. The house burned down in Part 1, like I said, and there is continuity here. The first stage, it's the burned out shell of the original mansion. You don't get to the second house, which is on an adjacent island, until stage 5. And Jennifer does appear to still be dead. In stage 6, Rick descends into hell, I mean the void, to save her soul, like an extremely violent Orpheus. So in the process of saving Jennifer, Rick has to crush a lot of monsters, using numerous implements including lead pipes, shotguns, and my personal favorite, a chainsaw. Rick looks like he could give Eric Dames a run for his money. I mean, just look at that swing with the Bodor. Pretty good, ain't it? And hey, barring a weapon, he can always rely on his fists and feet. And he'll have to deal with all manner of ghouls in a game that, well, yeah, it looks a bit tame today, was one of the most violent games available in 1992, the same year as the first Mortal Kombat was released. Now, one of the main criticisms of this game is that its gameplay isn't very deep. It's style over substance. And, well, yeah, I mean, fair point. But if you're a huge horror fan, then the style makes up for the lack of substance. I mean, just look at these graphics. This game is impressive for the era, with a ton of unique sprites and varied backgrounds, from the burned out mansion to the creepy cellar, the river, hell, the void. It's all great looking, and full of references to mostly 80s horror films like Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Evil Dead 2, and even more offbeat fare like The Deadly Spawn. It doesn't lean as hard on the references as the more parody-themed Wanpaku Graffiti, but for the sharp-eyed horror fan, they are there. Now let's talk music. This game has one of the best soundtracks on the hardware, especially from a third-party publisher. The Genesis Yamaha FM synth chip sounds absolutely terrible in the hands of devs who phone it in, but in the hands of folks who really want to make it work, it sings. And it's especially appropriate given that many of the best known 80s horror soundtracks rely heavily on synthesizers themselves, with stuff by folks like John Carpenter, Goblin, Fabio Frizzi, and John Harrison making up some of the best examples. I mean, the music in this game wouldn't feel that out of place in a 70s or 80s horror movie. This is a fantastic piece of early horror gaming and, fun fact, the only M-rated game on Nintendo's Virtual Console service. Speaking of that, it's going to be your best way to play this game these days as it's only $8 there, but it is only available on the original Wii Shop, and that service is going away pretty soon, so move fast. Barring that, you can get it as part of the 2010 remake of Splatterhouse that was on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. The entire original trilogy is unlockable there, and that game's only about $20. When it comes to original cartridges, yeah, this one is ridiculously expensive. It's going to cost you a minor fortune these days, which is a shame, but I'd probably bypass that option unless you're a serious collector. And that does it. Thank you so much for watching, and happy Halloween! If you missed any of our October videos, today is really the perfect day to go back and watch them. I'm Raj the Retro Gaming Puppet, and I'll see you next time, right here on Obscure Old Games.